Welcome to the Bearded Naked podcast. I'm Gareth Johnson, and this podcast series is a conversation with Matt, the Bearded Naked Yogi. In this 6-part series, we're exploring the Vrittis, the fluctuations of the mind. Now, this is the 5th episode in our series about the Vrittis. So far, we've covered an overview of the Vrittis, we've looked in depth at Pramana, we've identified the false knowledge of Viparya, and we've highlighted the challenges of having an overactive imagination as we've looked at Vikalpa. What are we tackling in this episode?
So as we dive into episode 5, we are going to be having a conversation and an examination of the Vritti of Nidra. Now, Nidra, in its most general translation, means sleep or slumber. But in the context of yogic philosophy, and specifically within the context of the Vrittis, Nidra has a bit of a deeper connotation beyond this ordinary state of sleep that we have all experienced in our lives. Within the system of yoga, as described within the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Nidra is seen as the fourth of the Vrittis, or these fluctuations and modifications of the mind. And these fluctuations, these modifications, as we've discussed, they create a disturbance within the mental landscape and have an impact, both positive and negative, on our true cognition of all things.
Now, sleeping is my kind of yoga. I do some of my best thinking while I'm sleeping. So I'm going to be smashing this, right?
You're an expert already. You're an absolute expert. When we come to examine Nidra within this context of the Vrittis, we are referring to a state of, let's call it mental dullness or even lethargy. It's an unconsciousness that obstructs our sense of mental clarity, our awareness of ourself and of others, and even down to hindering what we might call our spiritual progress. Now, Nidra is considered an obstacle on this path of clarity and awareness and even liberation, because when our mind is in this state of Nidra, it is disturbed by this Vritti of Nidra. It's unable to remain focused. We lose a sense of alertness and our attentiveness to what we will call the present moment. I guess we could say, at its very essence, Nidra represents a state of mental inertia, a sense of heaviness that clouds the clarity of our conscious awareness. It's not just the absence of wakefulness. We're not just talking about being asleep here, but rather it's a very distinct mode of awareness that's characterized by a lack of vibrancy. There is a lack of alertness to the moment. Now, within the Vrittis themselves, Nidra occupies a rather unique space, and it does serve as a reminder of this inherent duality of the mind. Let's just reflect again here. When we're discussing the Vrittis, they are neither positive nor negative. They are both one and the same. So just as, let's say, light cannot exist without darkness, we cannot have day without night, hot without cold, this wakefulness cannot exist without its opposite, this Vritti of Nidra. Therefore, it stands as a bit of a counterpart, perhaps, to the Vrittis that are considered much more active, much more engaging with the mind itself. And it does offer us a necessary respite, perhaps, from the relentless chatter and narrative of the mind.
I kind of understand that counterpoint explanation, but it almost sounds to me like you're saying that sleep is bad. But we need to sleep, right?
We do need to sleep. And whilst sleep is a natural and essential aspect of the human existence, Nidra, as a Vritti, it represents more than just that physiological phenomenon. We're talking here about a psychological state that can manifest even in our moments of complete wakefulness and alertness. It is a state of mind that clouds our perception and again brings a little dullness. It brings a little heaviness to that sense of awareness. In its subtlest form, perhaps, Nidra manifests within the mind as a mental fog. And we've all had that, where your brain just doesn't want to work. We can't do this piece of work. Our mind isn't in it. We're just completely dull and numb within our thinking capacity. And this is, or rather, this obscures that ability to think clearly. It hinders our ability to make decisions. We can say that it's a feeling of being mentally checked out. You're disconnected from the present moment and you're just lost in a haze of thoughtlessness. It's kind of like, we can think of it, we've all heard people say, oh God, what a day that was. I felt like I was asleep all the way through it. It's that same sort of physical sensation or experience, if you like, of being asleep, except we are awake, but the mind is not doing it. Absolutely refuses to do what we're asking of it.
I'm not a doctor, but it sounds a little like chronic fatigue or maybe an iron deficiency.
I'm not a doctor either. And that's one of the things. I often have students come and they will present themselves to me with all sorts of fantastical physical ailments. And I do have to stand there sometimes and go, I appreciate you sharing. However, I'm not a medical professional. I'm a yoga instructor. I might be able to help, but I might not as well. Anyway, chronic fatigue or iron deficiency. Well, perhaps these can produce Nidra within the mind. These could be a catalyst for the state of Nidra in the mind. But let's come back to that positive and negative aspect here. Nidra is not necessarily a negative force. It's not something necessarily to be overcome or eradicated from our experience. Like all Vrittis here, it serves a useful and functional purpose within this grand orchestration of the mind. Within its proper context, Nidra can be a source of rejuvenation. It can bring about a sense of renewal. It provides the mind with a little rest and a little restoration that it needs to function optimally. However, when Nidra becomes excessive or overwhelming within our experience, and again, perhaps generated by chronic fatigue, perhaps generated by a physical ailment or deficiency within the body, it can lead to this state of complete mental stagnation and even apathy towards existence itself. It's the difference between the experience of having a restful night's sleep and a chronic sense of lethargy that pervades every aspect of our waking lives.
I guess where I'm struggling with this a little bit is that kind of lethargic feeling is generally a bit beyond our control, isn't it? I mean, especially if it's after lunch and you've had a big meal, you're trying to sit through a long meeting. Are there any techniques that we can use to try and stay focused and present?
You're absolutely right that physical feeling of lethargy, that mental feeling of lethargy, is often beyond our control. And absolutely, the biological processes of the body, if we've eaten a fantastically large meal, then the body needs time to digest the food. Therefore, it will shut down other processes. This is a natural part of life. How one comes to address, let's say, this excessive sense of Nidra, it all comes back to that cultivation of mindfulness and awareness of the process. If one is aware that one is going to eat a large meal, then one would naturally expect that period of, oh, I can't be arsed this afternoon, I just want to sit here, or I'll do an easy piece of work that isn't going to tax my mind. Now, to me, that's a very efficient use of one's resources, and that's absolutely fine. It's the excessiveness, perhaps, of Nidra. That's where one's awareness and one's mindfulness comes in. If one is aware of this tendency of mental lethargy and dullness, one can introduce very simple things to counteract that excessive amount of Nidra within the experience. Here's one perhaps that we might be able to relate to in the modern world, certainly if one attends a gym or regular exercise classes, and obviously I'll push the yoga there. If we have a little bit of time away from the gym, Perhaps we've had an injury and we've not been for 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden the time comes around again. It's time to go back to the gym. And oh my God, you can't be asked, can you? You really cannot be asked. You're like, no, I'm just going to sit on the sofa. I'll go tomorrow. This can be a manifestation of Nidra within the experience. You're caught within its grip. Now, how do you get over that? Well, you go and do the thing that you need to go and do. You go to the gym. We've all done it. We've all really not wanted to go and do an exercise class or a task or something that requires us to expend a little bit of energy to move out of this lethargic state. But once that task is done, well, you can't wait to get back to the gym the day after or the day after that. You tackle the problem by doing the thing that Nidra is preventing you from doing. I hope that makes sense.
No, it totally does, because by sort of articulating, oh, what's holding me back is this sense of lethargy, you then know all I need to do is push through and carry on with things. You know, I recently did a yoga class that was called Nidra Yoga, and it was kind of like a guided meditation. Is that what we're talking about here, or is that something completely different?
So the yoga of Nidra, or Nidra yoga as it's sometimes referred as well, it is a technique within the practices of yoga. It's not necessarily the same, although the terminology, the word itself, Nidra, is involved. Let's just remember here that word Nidra means that sense of sleep or slumber. Yoga Nidra is often sometimes called the yogic sleep as well. This is a very deeply relaxing technique where one will lie within a Shavasana posture on the back of the body, completely in repose. And for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, you make yourself nice and cozy, get a cushion for your head, pop a blanket over the top of you, close your eyes. It's a very immersive experience where a teacher will guide you through a process. You are not physically moving your body, you're allowing your body to enter into this deep state of rest. What remains within that deep state of rest is a sense of mental awareness. The words that are being spoken within a Nidra, all again consumed with relaxing the body, releasing the muscles. So perhaps whilst we can see the vritti of Nidra as being concerned with that over relaxation, that lethargy within the mind, the inability, the dullness, the can't be asked attitude, with Yoga Nidra there is a purpose to this. There is a purpose of deeply relaxing the body. We're all running around like crazy these days, and if you have never done a Yoga Nidra class, go and do it. It will be the best 60 minutes of doing nothing that you've ever done in your life.
Now, how does Nidra connect to the other aspects of the Vrittis that we've been discussing?
Nidra, alongside with the other Vrittis, is, we can call it a recognition and an understanding here that reminds us that our perception of reality is shaped not only by our conscious thoughts and feelings. Certainly the other Vrittis tend to have a little bit more activity about them, let's say. But these perceptions are also influenced by these subtle currents of consciousness that flow just beneath the surface. And this is really the realm of Nidra here. Now, we can embrace Nidra as a very natural and integral aspect of the human experience. We can learn to navigate these periods of lethargy and dullness with a sense of grace and wisdom. You know, this is all about finding balance here. This is all about being aware, achieving a sense of clarity amidst the ebb and flow of the mind. These fluctuations that come, these fluctuations that go. By being aware of the activities that happen, we have that grace and we have that wisdom to move through them.
That brings us to the end of this episode of the Bearded Naked podcast. I'm Gareth Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at GTV London. If you want to get in touch with Matt or find out more about his online courses and retreats, head over to his website, thebeardednakedyogi.com.
Thank you very much for listening, and I think I might have a little nap actually now. I'm going to embrace my sense of Nidra. Take care. We'll see you all next time in episode 6.